Hello everyone, it's Deb again. So this is an update to episode 29, which I filmed last year right before winter hit. And that was where I was showing you how I was measuring and trying to utilize the scrap wood from my build out. So I ended up with like 24 very odd shaped pieces of scrap out of that 6 pieces of plywood, and I had 2 shelves in my rig, the center area on the inside, that I wanted to fill up, and I thought I would make boxes for them. So this is what I came up with, and it did take quite a while to actually plan for this because, again, the wood that I was working with, my camera's probably going to go out of focus, but if you can see there's at least 24 different size pieces of scrap wood that I had to work with. And then I had, certain goals or limitations beyond that. That was the first limitation, was that I was just trying to use up the scrap wood that I had. So I was just working with what I had. And then the second goal was to make sure that I was using up all of the shelf space in my rig, and each one of the shelves was 17 3/4 by 25 1/2. And so that's the 17 3/4 by 25 1/2. Plus I had to, give it a little bit of allowance for handles and everything. And so those were the dimensions that I was working with. And then I was just working with whatever scrap wood that I had. And the third goal or limitation or whatever it was, that I was trying to work around the things that I need to carry with me. And so what I first did was, these are little plastic boxes that have these separators in here, and this is where I keep all my crystals for the jewelry that I make. And so I was initially just trying to make a home for this, and I designed this box to hold all of those little containers, and I messed up. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to tell or not, but I messed up and I didn't make it quite long enough, and so there's an overlap there. See that? It doesn't fit right. But they would have fit all in that box. They would have come up a little bit taller than the wooden box, but it would have been okay. But because I screwed up on the dimensions for front to back, that's not going to work. But thankfully, this other shelf, so this is one shelf, and this is the second shelf. Thankfully, this box was basically the same width, but I had enough scrap wood to make a long box. And so now all of my crystal stuff is going to have to sit over here. And each compartment is a different crystal. In case you're wondering, they're just little tiny chips of crystals. And so now they're going to have to live in here. And I've got a little bit of space here that I can fill in it with whatever I need to fill in. But that was supposed to be, they were supposed to go there, and that was supposed to be the bottom shelf, and then that was going to be the next shelf up. But now this is going to have to be the bottom shelf, and that's going to have to be the next shelf up, right underneath my clothing bin. And so I'm just switching things around. It's okay. I've had to change things so many times that it really just doesn't even matter at this point. As long as I can make it work in the end, I'm good to go. And so, unfortunately, I did not have enough wood to fill up the whole entire space, but I knew that I had things that would fill the gap. And so back here, I buy these tar bar filters by the case, and I knew I would need a space for that. And so this perfectly fits right back here with enough room for a few books. And so that's going to fill up one whole shelf right there. And then this one, I had a little bit of space up here, and I always use collagen peptide, so I knew I would need a home for that, so that was okay. Plus I had enough space for another book right there, so I can always fill up the gaps. Any kind of gaps that I have, I can almost always fill them up with some books or anything else. I have a ton of books that I want to bring with me, and I don't have enough room for them. And so this was a chore. It was definitely a chore. We first started out by screwing, just putting screws in to assemble them. So my ex took all those pieces of wood that I had marked in episode 29, and I'll put a link for that video in the description. All those different pieces of wood that I had measured and marked and told him where to cut and everything, he did all that, and he brought them home. And I needed help assembling them because it's actually, you know, you need more than 2 hands when you're doing that. And I didn't film any of it. But basically what we did was we started by putting screws in there. And that's how I was going to put them together. That's how I was going to assemble these, was just to have a few screws going down the side into that. But what happened was the wood started splitting right down there. I've already sanded it out and smoothed it out, but you might be able to see right there. It started splitting, and so we knew right away that just putting these together with screws was not going to work. And so he fortunately has an air nailer, and we were able to go ahead and assemble them with these nails. And it doesn't look the best, but it looks better than all the splitting that was happening when we were trying to use these screws. There's another one right there, and you can see kind of right there that groove. It was just splintering that wood away. So the screws were just, they were out of the question. And so we went ahead and nailed all this together, and the bottom board is inset instead of it being mounted on the other way. I had to design it this way because, again, I had the constraints of the size of the boards, and so I'm sure a professional woodworker would have made it so that the bottom board was mounted on the bottom of these, but again, I was just working with what I have. And so I did, because we couldn't, sorry about the focus camera, because we couldn't use screws, which I thought would be good enough to hold everything together, and we had to use these nails. I went ahead and I put wood glue all along those seams, just right down the thing, and then we put the wood up against it, and then we nailed it in. And any wood glue that was squishing out, I just took a paper towel and cleaned that up. And after, you know, because I made sure that all of the pieces of wood were polyurethaned before we put them together, or before we did anything to them. But then after he made all those cuts, it left a bunch of raw edges. So after I had him help me assemble these, I went through with my polyurethane, and I first sanded them. Anything that needed sanded, I sanded them. And then I went through and I polyurethaned all these edges, and everywhere where there was exposed wood, I polyurethaned. So all of these are polyurethaned, at least 3 coats, maybe 4 coats. And unfortunately, the nailer, it has its limitations, and if you're not using it right, like my ex was pretty much in just a hurry to help me and get done with it, and so he wasn't aiming the nail gun exactly the way it should have because he was in a hurry. And so on 4, I have 6 of these boxes. One of them's up there, and I'll show you that here in a minute. But out of 6 of these boxes, only 2 of them survived without any kind of damage. The rest of them all have damage. This is a nail that when he brought it through from that side, he was nailing from that side. He wasn't aiming it right, and so it came in at an angle, So every single one of these boxes has some kind of damage. This one actually has two. You can see there's a nail there, and there's a nail there. And so it came up too far. And right here, there's a nail there. On this one, I tried to pound it down and then sand it smooth and then polyurethane over it. But the rest of them, there's really nothing I could do. So I've got that nail exposed right there. And he just kind of laughed it off. I was a little upset, and he was just like, well, you've got that shelf liner, so just, you know, put that in the bottom of it. So even though I would have preferred to not have to do that, that's what I'm going to have to do. This is the grippy shelf liner, and I use this in the back of the rig for the bottom shelf where the jars are going to sit, and then I also wrapped each one of my jars with this, and I have some left over. And so what I'm going to have to do is just cut pieces that will fit so that I can just line the whole bottom to cover up these things. And one nail even went through on the outside, and I can't find it right now, so it must be hiding pretty well. But one of them even came through on this side, and I don't even know what to do about that. I might put like a sticker over it or something like that. So that's that. And then for the handles, I wanted to use that leftover strapping that I made a video about. It's that web strapping that I'm using to hold things in as an anchor in my rig. And so I was just using the leftover web strapping from that. And that actually was kind of hard to do, and I'll show you why. These are the boxes for the inside. This is a box that I made that will hold my spices. And this box is going to be on the outside of my rig. Not the outside, but like when you open the hatch, it'll be on the back side of my rear cargo area where all my food and everything is. And so I made this box specifically for the jars that I have for spices, and I measured it out perfectly. There'll be 18 jars that sit in here. And so this is the first one that I put the strapping on. And so when I cut the straps, I basically cut them the length that I would need so that when I went to grab the drawer, it would fit my fingers in it, just like that. And so that's how I determined the length of the strap. But if you can see here, can you see what happened here? Look at how boogered up that is. Do you see that? This is what it started with. That's what it looked like to start with. And when I started drilling those screws into there, it caught the webbing and it was binding up the webbing. And so it would bind it. I would have to reverse the drill and back it out and then go back in and back it out and go back in. But every single time, and these are not even tight. I can't get them all the way tight without deforming that webbing, and that looks horrible, and I'm not happy at all about that because it just looks horrible. But I went ahead and I did both sides. I don't know if you can see. Yeah, look at that. It went from that to that. And I'm just not happy at all. So I'm going to take these straps out and I'm going to redo it. But because the webbing, when you cut it, it frays. I had to burn these edges anyways with my lighter. I'm not sure if you saw that in that video that I made about the webbing. But after I cut this webbing, I have to burn it with a lighter to make it so that it doesn't fray anymore. And so what I was thinking in my mind was, how can I make a hole? Because this is so very tight, this weave is so tight that you can't just like use a hole punch or anything like that with it. And so in my mind I was just like, how can I put a hole in there, like a pilot hole, so that the screws, these are the screws that I'm using. You know, how can I make it so that the threads on this are not catching that? And I do have an awl, AWL, and what I thought I would do is just like use my lighter and take it to the awl and heat it up and just try to just push a hole through. And then I was sitting here and I was just kind of going over it in my mind, and I'm like, you know what, my mom gave me a wood burner many years before my mom even passed away. She gave me this little wood burner. That's even her writing right there. And I totally forgot about it. She was my little crafty mama, and she was always giving me stuff to craft with, and I just totally forgot about it. My ex had actually been using it to do some wood burning, some actual wood burning, and you know, it just dawned on me when I was sitting here that maybe I could use that tip, because this gets very hot. That's very hot right now. And so I was wondering if I could just use that tip to make a pilot hole through the webbing. And so I went ahead and on this scrap piece that I have, this is just scrap that I had left over, I went ahead and started experimenting. And so that's what I got. It doesn't look perfect. This one's not perfectly circular, but I finally have holes that are burnished. They're already burnt, so they won't ravel or unravel. They already have a nice big burn to it. And this is not big enough tip to make holes that big. And so what I had to do was I just had to put it in there and make a pilot hole and then start going around slowly and widening that hole as big as I needed it. And I just got it as wide as I could to make it so that when I put the screws through it, it actually goes all the way through, and now it's not going to take that webbing and bunch it up when I go to put the screws in. I'm not sure if the camera will show that very well or not. But that's how I have it, two sitting side by side, and there's just barely enough room for them to sit side by side. So I have to be really careful. But now I can use this as my guideline, and I can go ahead and burn holes. I'll just use that as a little template, and I'll just take the center, and I'll just put that center point in there. But I've got all these straps for all those drawers down there, and so I can just use this as my template and go through and burn holes at each end, 2 holes on each end. And every time I would burn through it, it would leave that residue. It's just plastic, nylon, or whatever, and so I'm just wiping it off. Just when the tip gets gunky and it starts smoking, I just wipe it off real quick. And that's working out really well. So now I should be able to put the rest of these handles on without it getting all scrunched up or anything. And I'm just putting them basically at the halfway point. So like halfway up the drawer, that's where I'm going to put it. Except for this one, I'm going to have to fix these. And now since those holes are already there, I'm going to have to move it up just ever so slightly because I don't want to go back into those holes again. Or maybe I will and I'll just put some wood glue in there. I'm not sure. But we'll see. If I put the screws in there and it feels like it wants to come out, I'm just going to have to use wood glue for these screws. But for the rest of the drawers, it should be okay. And then, because this wood is a certain thickness, I was afraid that the tips of these screws were going to go through, because that is pretty much the thickness of my wood, and the tip would come through just a little bit. And so we went and bought these number 8 washers. These are number 8 by 1/2 inch screws. And so I just had my ex, get me some number 8 washers from the hardware store where he works. And so I've got 2 of them. and that makes it the perfect thickness so that that screw is not going to come through the backside onto the inside of the drill. And you can maybe kind of see it. I don't even know if I can get close enough. But yeah, you can kind of see those washers. I was thinking about putting one washer on the inside and one on the outside, or maybe both of them on the inside. I don't know. But I think probably for the most part, you're not going to be able to even tell that they're there. So I might not even worry about it. But now I have to replace these straps. But thankfully I have a lot of this extra strapping available. So I was able to cut 2 more pieces for that little drawer over here. And the only thing left I have to do after that is to put UHMW tape on the bottom of the drawers so that when I slide them in and out of the shelves, I'm not marking up the shelves. I don't want to have wood rubbing on wood. And so we have this UHMW tape from a job that I worked at. Actually, that's where my husband and I met, or my ex-husband and I met, was at work. And we worked in a factory. And this is basically anti-static tape. It's got this backing here, and it's got adhesive on there. But that's what they call it, is UHMW. I don't even remember what that stands for, but it's basically anti-static tape so that when things roll across it, it doesn't build up a lot of static. And I thought that was good enough. That was just something that we have left over that I can just use in my build. We're not using it for anything else. So I guess that's it. I am not going to have these done tonight. I'm not going to be able to like take a picture or anything at the end, but I will go ahead and do another update when I'm all done and I have them actually in my rig. Then I'll do another update and show you how they look. But so far, this is what I have, and I'm actually pretty happy about the way I was able to utilize all that scrap wood and everything, and I have almost a perfect fit. But again, I'm not worried about these 2 spots because I have other things that can fill up the gaps so that nothing's shifting around or moving around. So that's it, you guys. I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye.